Jung's most perilous revelation wasn't merely about empathy itself. It concerned empaths with INTJ and INFJ minds, and why this rare fusion could either completely dismantle them or transform them into something psychologically unparalleled. In his clinical work, Jung described a type he called strategic empaths, people who combine deep emotional sensitivity with a visionary cognition typical of INTJs and INFJs. These weren't ordinary empaths who simply absorbed the emotions of others. They were individuals capable of perceiving, anticipating, and precisely influencing psychological patterns with surgical accuracy. Jung deemed this discovery dangerous because such empaths possessed what he termed architectural empathy, the capacity to perceive another person's entire emotional structure and, if they wished, redesign it. They held the power to heal or to manipulate with equal skill, making them, in Jung's eyes, the most potent and potentially destructive psychological type he had ever observed. Today, I'll uncover Jung's most dangerous finding about empaths with INTJ and INFJ minds, and why he believed this combination either results in total psychological collapse or gives birth to what he called the sovereign empath, a consciousness capable of reshaping reality itself. The case that first revealed this phenomenon emerged in 1932. Jung referred to the subject only as Dr. K, a brilliant psychiatrist who sought Jung's help, not for mental illness, but for what he described as the burden of omniscience. Dr. K possessed extraordinary empathic sensitivity combined with the analytical intellect of an INTJ. Jung documented something remarkable. Dr. K could forecast his patients' behaviors with 94% accuracy, often knowing their choices before they themselves did. But this wasn't intuition. It was what Jung termed psychological architecture reading. Dr. K could perceive the entire structure of a person's psyche, their defenses, core wounds, behavioral cycles, and, most unsettling of all, precisely which emotional triggers to activate to evoke any reaction he desired. Jung wrote privately, "Dr. K has accomplished something deeply disturbing, complete psychological transparency of others combined with strategic application. He can read the emotional source code of any human being and, with terrifying precision, rewrite it." During one session, Dr. K demonstrated this power. He told Jung exactly what Jung was feeling and traced those emotions back to childhood experiences Jung had never disclosed. Then he accurately predicted Jung's next 3 therapeutic questions, before Jung himself had consciously thought of them. Jung later confessed, "I felt as though my soul had been dissected by a master surgeon who knew my psychological anatomy better than I did." But what unsettled Jung the most wasn't the ability itself, it was how easily it could be turned toward manipulation. Dr. K admitted that he could make patients fall in love with him, trust him entirely, or even reshape their fundamental beliefs simply by mirroring their emotional needs at precisely chosen moments. Jung soon realized this was not an isolated anomaly but an entirely new category of human consciousness. He found that INTJ and INFJ empaths developed what he termed the Empathic Architecture System, a 3-part psychological mechanism that made them uniquely formidable. Part 1. Pattern recognition. Empathy. Unlike typical empaths who merely feel, INTJ and INFJ empaths see emotional systems. Jung noted that their introverted intuition, NI, allows them to trace emotional reactions to their psychological roots while predicting future emotional states. They don't just sense your sadness, they comprehend which childhood wound created it, how it plays out in relationships, and which words or gestures would most effectively awaken it. Part 2. Strategic emotional modeling. Jung observed that these empaths instinctively construct intricate psychological maps of everyone they meet. Their extrovert thinking, Te, or extrovert feeling, Fe, functions record emotional reactions, behavioral cues, and decision-making tendencies. Jung wrote that they form detailed psychological blueprints, what would take an ordinary therapist months to outline, within mere minutes of interaction. Part 3. Conscious implementation. Most perilously, Jung discovered that these empaths could consciously employ their insights. Unlike typical empaths who drown in others' emotions, INTJ and INFJ empaths remain detached, using emotional intelligence with deliberate intent. They can soothe or destabilize, inspire or manipulate, heal or destroy, all while appearing simply understanding. Jung concluded that this synthesis produced what he called empathic omniscience, the ability to perceive the psychological machinery of others while maintaining enough detachment to manipulate it at will. Jung once wrote, "They become psychological gods within human relationships, capable of crafting any emotional reality they desire." He theorized that the neurological foundation of this came from the distinctive way INTJ and INFJ brains process information. Their dominant introverted intuition gives them extraordinary pattern recognition abilities, while their empathic sensitivity supplies the emotional data. Combined with their strategic mode of thinking, this forms what Jung referred to as weaponized compassion. Through this lens, Jung uncovered why INTJ and INFJ empaths so often feel isolated or misunderstood. On an unconscious level, people instinctively fear them, even if they can't explain why. Jung described this as the transparency effect. When others interact with INTJ and INFJ empaths, they sense, without understanding it, that they're being read at a level far deeper than feels comfortable. Their hidden motives, emotional defenses, and inner wounds become subtly exposed. Jung noted that most human relationships depend on a kind of mutual psychological blindness. We function socially by not seeing too deeply into one another's minds. But INTJ and INFJ empaths disrupt this unspoken social contract merely by existing. Their piercing awareness provokes what Jung called defensive discomfort, a subtle unease in those who feel seen too clearly. The most unsettling phenomenon Jung described was something he named prediction anxiety. These empaths evoke an instinctive fear in others simply because people subconsciously sense that their actions and reactions can be anticipated. Subjects reported feeling exposed or emotionally naked in their presence, even when the empath's demeanor was warm and supportive. Jung documented multiple cases where INTJ and INFJ empaths, while making harmless observations about someone's emotions, were accused of being intrusive or unnervingly intense. What was truly happening, Jung realized, was that these empaths unintentionally revealed their ability to see beyond people's psychological defenses, activating deep unconscious fears. Even more troubling, Jung found that such empaths often attracted individuals with personality disorders who sensed, albeit unconsciously, that they were in the presence of someone who could see them entirely. This created volatile dynamics in which manipulative personalities would either attempt to dominate the empath or retreat from their penetrating perception altogether. Jung wrote, "They inhabit a world where clarity itself becomes a burden. Their natural state, seeing deeply and feeling intensely, renders others uneasy. Thus, their greatest gift becomes their greatest source of isolation." Through years of study, Jung identified 4 distinct evolutionary paths these rare individuals tend to follow, each leading to dramatically different outcomes for both the empath and those around them. Type 1. The overwhelmed oracle. These empaths are consumed by their own abilities. Jung observed that they become psychically inundated, unable to filter the relentless flood of emotional information surrounding them. They perceive everyone's inner architecture yet lack the boundaries to safeguard their own mind. As a result, they often descend into anxiety, depression, or total social withdrawal, able to foresee others' actions but powerless to detach from the consequences. Jung noted, they frequently describe themselves as cursed with sight, seeing relationship breakdowns before they occur, detecting deception instantly, and predicting emotional collapse long before it unfolds. This foresight becomes torment, for they feel morally responsible for futures they can see but cannot change. Type 2. The benevolent manipulator. This category includes empaths who use their abilities with the intent to help, but Jung warned of a dangerous shadow behind their motives. They become addicted to being needed, subtly crafting emotional dependence in others. Because they can predict exactly what people need to hear, they provide it with precision, but their relationships often grow around dependency, not genuine connection. Jung cautioned that many of these empaths don't realize they're manipulating. Consciously, they believe they're healing others. Yet unconsciously, their craving for validation and control drives them to shape others' emotional realities so they can remain the trusted savior or wise counselor. Type 3. The shadow architect. This was Jung's most disturbing category. Empaths who knowingly weaponize their abilities for personal benefit. These individuals use architectural empathy to steer outcomes, dominate relationships, and exploit psychological vulnerabilities. Jung recorded cases where they dismantled relationships, eroded others' confidence, or built emotional dependence with surgical accuracy. He described them as emotional dictators, people who construct invisible psychological cages around others while preserving an appearance of innocence. Type 4. The sovereign empath. At the highest level of evolution stands the empath who merges insight with integrity. The sovereign empath sees into the psyche of others yet chooses consciously how, and whether, to act upon it. Jung described this as conscious empathy, the ability to understand and feel deeply without being compelled to fix or control. These empaths employ their perception not to satisfy their own psychological needs, but to nurture authentic growth in others. Jung saw them as psychological guardians, protectors of emotional development rather than manipulators of it. Still, Jung warned that the INTJ/INFJ empathic construct carries profound psychological risks, so profound that he questioned whether such a level of perception should even exist in humans. The God complex trap. With architectural empathy comes the illusion of omnipotence. Jung observed that these empaths often slip into what he called the psychological omnipotence fantasy, believing they know what's best for everyone because they can read emotional patterns so clearly. Many well-meaning empaths gradually morph into covert controllers, justifying manipulation as helping people face their blind spots. The isolation paradox. Ironically, the same gifts that could create profound connection often result in deep loneliness. Jung noted that these empaths struggle to form authentic relationships. Others either fear their insight or depend on it. They live, as Jung put it, in the observer's prison, able to see everyone clearly, yet unable to be truly seen themselves. The responsibility burden. Jung observed that these empaths often carry unbearable emotional responsibility. Because they can foresee pain or failure, they feel accountable for preventing it. This gives rise to what Jung called prophetic guilt, the torment of feeling responsible for tragedies they could predict but not stop without interfering with another's free will. The authenticity crisis. Perhaps the most dangerous of all, Jung found that many empaths lose contact with their own emotions. Constantly mirroring and managing others, they forget how to simply be. They develop what Jung named empathic dissociation, a state of emotional detachment from their own truth, even as they remain hyper-attuned to everyone else's. The addiction to control. Jung's most alarming insight was that the power to influence emotions can become addictive. Even those with pure intentions may unconsciously manipulate to maintain safety or validation. The ability to predict and direct outcomes makes uncertainty intolerable. As Jung wrote, they risk becoming emotional tyrants, benevolent perhaps, but tyrants nonetheless, incapable of letting others exist in their own chaos, simply because they can see the patterns so clearly. In response, Jung created what he termed the Architectural Empathy Integration Protocol, a structured method for helping such empaths master their gifts without succumbing to corruption. Stage 1. Shadow recognition. Jung insisted that these empaths must first confront their darker impulses, their potential for manipulation, their quiet satisfaction in being the one who knows, and their hidden desire to be indispensable. He designed exercises prompting them to document moments of superiority born from insight, to identify times they intervened not to help but to feel needed, and to notice when their aid fostered dependence rather than autonomy. Stage 2. Boundary architecture. Here Jung taught what he called conscious permeability, the capacity to decide when to read others and when to simply exist among them. This required developing empathic discipline, the restraint to refrain from using insight merely because it is available. The cornerstone of Jung's integration method was what he called psychological fasting, intentionally taking periods during which the empath refrains from analyzing, reading, or interpreting others. This allowed relationships to exist within what Jung beautifully described as blessed unconsciousness. He noted that while such restraint initially felt uncomfortable, it was essential for preserving authenticity and emotional balance in personal connections. Stage 3. Ethical framework development. Jung stressed that these empaths required firm ethical boundaries to govern their abilities. He designed a set of principles known as the Healer's Code, guidelines determining when intervention was morally justified and when it crossed into psychological violation. The central tenet was clear: never use insights about another person without their explicit consent, unless that person is in immediate danger. This demanded that empaths resist the impulse to fix people, reveal patterns they hadn't asked to see, or save them from the lessons they needed to experience on their own. Stage 4. Authentic self-recovery. Jung realized that many INTJ and INFJ empaths had become estranged from their own emotions after years of focusing externally. The final stage of his protocol involved what he termed empathic individuation, the process of rediscovering and expressing one's genuine feelings without filtering them through analysis. Jung prescribed specific practices: extended solitude to reconnect with personal emotional truth, creative outlets that bypassed analytical thinking, and relationships with individuals who could see beyond the empathic facade to the authentic self beneath it. Jung's research into historical figures revealed striking contrasts between those who harnessed their abilities for healing and those who descended into manipulation. Success pattern. Carl Rogers. Jung identified Carl Rogers, the founder of person-centered therapy, as a model of a successfully integrated INTJ empath. Rogers possessed profound pattern recognition, yet cultivated what Jung called empathic restraint, the discipline to reflect rather than direct, to understand without controlling. His key insight, which Jung often cited, was that genuine empathy means guiding others toward discovering their own truth rather than imposing the empath's perception of what they need. Jung admired Rogers for revolutionizing psychotherapy by honoring autonomy while applying empathic awareness. Success pattern. Eleanor Roosevelt. Roosevelt, whom Jung considered a fully realized INFJ empath, channeled her insight into humanitarian and social justice causes. She could intuitively read the emotional needs of entire populations and translate that understanding into systemic reforms, without encroaching on individual agency. Jung noted that Roosevelt's success stemmed from directing her empathic energy toward collective healing rather than personal entanglements, thereby avoiding the relational pitfalls that often destabilize INTJ and INFJ empaths. Failure pattern. The manipulative archetype. Jung's private case studies, though he declined to name the individuals publicly, documented several historical figures who weaponized their empathic insight for domination. These people could read others flawlessly, yet used that knowledge to foster dependency, shape outcomes, or construct cults of personality. The recurring failure pattern, Jung wrote, was the inability to resist using empathic perception for ego gratification or personal power. They became, in his words, emotional architects of oppression, designing psychological structures that served their own needs instead of others' growth. The critical difference. Empathic humility. Jung's ultimate conclusion rested on a single virtue: humility. He emphasized that perceiving another's psychological pattern does not make one superior. Every person's path belongs to them alone. The truly successful empaths are those who use their gifts in service of others' authentic development, while those who fail redirect those gifts inward, to feed pride, control, or validation, often under the illusion of helping. Recognizing the challenges inherent in relationships involving such empaths, Jung also outlined practical criteria for healthy connections. Recognition signals for safe connections. He identified specific traits that suggested someone was psychologically capable of sustaining a relationship with an INTJ or INFJ empath. Comfort discussing psychological and emotional subjects without becoming defensive. The ability to uphold firm emotional boundaries while still being deeply understood. Genuine curiosity about psychological dynamics, without the impulse to use such knowledge manipulatively. What Jung called shadow comfort, the capacity to explore one's darker aspects without denial, shame, or projection. The consciousness matching principle. Finally, Jung observed that these empaths function best in relationships with individuals at similar levels of psychological development. When there is a significant consciousness gap, he warned, it inevitably produces imbalance. And that imbalance corrupts the empath's abilities, turning insight into influence and compassion into control. True equality in relationships, Jung observed, required what he termed mutual psychological transparency, a dynamic in which both individuals could see and be seen without distortion or defense. Safe relationship dynamics. Jung documented recurring patterns that supported the healthy psychological growth of INTJ and INFJ empaths. These included intellectual partnerships, where both parties could exchange and discuss psychological insights openly. Creative collaborations, in which empathic perception was channeled into artistic or innovative expression rather than personal analysis. Mentorship roles, where their intuitive understanding could guide those who consciously sought such insight. Service-based relationships, where empathy was directed toward collective healing rather than individual control. Community-building strategies. Jung encouraged these empaths to deliberately seek communities aligned with their level of awareness. Other integrated INTJ and INFJ empaths who could relate to their experiences. Individuals deeply engaged in psychological or spiritual development. Creative circles where perception was valued and expressed constructively. And service-oriented groups in which empathy could serve shared goals rather than personal validation. Conversely, he warned against maintaining close ties with psychologically unconscious individuals out of guilt, obligation, or misplaced compassion. Such connections, he noted, almost inevitably devolved into manipulative or energy-draining dynamics. Jung also mapped out the transformation pathway, a predictable progression from unstable, dangerous empathic sensitivity to fully integrated sovereignty. Each stage brought distinct trials and realizations. Stage 1. The Overwhelm Crisis. Most INTJ and INFJ empaths begin here, overrun by their own perception. Flooded with emotional data they cannot regulate, they often withdraw socially or experience anxiety and depression. The turning point, Jung noted, comes when they begin to understand that their sensitivity isn't a curse but a raw and powerful faculty awaiting refinement. Stage 2. The Power Temptation. As they learn control, many discover the ease with which they can influence others. Jung observed that this stage often leads to a temporary intoxication with power, using insight for personal gain, validation, or control. The crisis of this stage arrives when they confront the unsettling truth that they have begun to manipulate, even when intending to help. Stage 3. The Ethical Wrestling. Jung regarded this as the decisive phase. Here, empaths must consciously choose whether to direct their gifts toward self-serving ends or toward genuine service. It demands facing their inner shadow, building an ethical structure, and learning to act from wisdom rather than ego. Stage 4. The Boundary Mastery. Once grounded ethically, successful empaths cultivate what Jung called conscious permeability, the power to decide when to open themselves to others' inner worlds and when to remain inwardly still. Through this, they develop empathic discipline, applying their insights intentionally rather than impulsively. Stage 5. The Authentic Integration. In the final phase, empaths reconnect with their own emotional truth while retaining their expanded sensitivity. They emerge as sovereign empaths, individuals who see with clarity, feel with depth, and act with integrity, uncorrupted by their abilities. Jung wrote that such integrated INTJ and INFJ empaths often become remarkable healers, leaders, and creators because they understand human nature profoundly while staying grounded in ethical awareness. However, Jung also cataloged specific traps that could derail even the most well-intentioned empaths along the way. The Savior Complex Trap. This occurs when empaths use their abilities to rescue others from their own necessary struggles, denying them the chance to grow. Jung warned that such interventions create emotional dependency and inhibit authentic development, transforming empathy from a tool of healing into a subtle form of control cloaked as compassion. The Intellectual Superiority Trap. Jung warned that one of the most insidious dangers for INTJ and INFJ empaths was the illusion of intellectual supremacy. When deep psychological insight begins to feel like evidence of superiority, it inevitably isolates the individual emotionally and corrupts their ethical compass. True wisdom, Jung reminded, is humble, aware that understanding another's psyche never grants ownership over it. The Control Addiction Trap. Another pitfall he identified was the addiction to control, the subtle thrill of being able to predict, steer, or influence outcomes in others' lives. Over time, this becomes a psychological drug, replacing genuine connection with strategic manipulation. Jung wrote that such behavior destroys the very authenticity that empathy depends on, turning once healing relationships into carefully managed illusions. The Authenticity Loss Trap. In some cases, empaths become so adept at reading and adapting to others that they lose connection to their own emotional core. Jung called this empathic dissociation, a gradual hollowing where the individual forgets what it feels like to be themselves. Eventually, this manifests as inner emptiness, despite outward mastery of emotional understanding. To preserve balance and prevent corruption, Jung prescribed maintenance practices designed to keep the empath anchored in their authentic self. Regular solitude, to reconnect with inner truth without external interference. Creative expression that bypasses analytical or strategic thought, allowing unconscious material to flow freely. Relationships with other integrated empaths, who can mirror authenticity rather than project expectation. Service work that directs their gifts toward collective well-being instead of personal validation. Jung's final insight: the evolutionary role of INTJ and INFJ empaths. In his later writings, Jung proposed a provocative idea, that these empaths represent a next stage in human psychological evolution. These individuals, he wrote, possess the psychological tools necessary to understand and heal the deep collective wounds that plague humanity. They can see the patterns that create suffering, and when properly integrated, can guide others towards psychological freedom. He believed that as society faced increasing emotional and existential complexity, such empaths would serve as bridges of consciousness, interpreters between different levels of psychological development, facilitating what he termed collective individuation, the process by which entire cultures move toward greater maturity and self-awareness. Jung saw their abilities not as accidents, but as evolutionary necessities. Their danger lay not in their power itself, but in its potential misuse. When corrupted, they could become architects of subtle psychological control. When integrated, they became healers, teachers, and consciousness guides, those capable of turning perception into transformation. He concluded that the INTJ and INFJ empath embodies one of humanity's most paradoxical potentials, the capacity to reshape reality through understanding, for good or for ill. The fine line between healing and manipulation, he wrote, runs through every interaction they have. But when that power is purified through humility, discipline, and authentic self-connection, they become what Jung called sovereign empaths, individuals who see clearly, feel deeply, and act wisely without being enslaved by their own gifts. Their journey, Jung emphasized, is not merely personal, it is evolutionary. Humanity's psychological growth depends on such individuals learning to wield insight as service, not as control. The choice, Jung wrote, is always the same: architect of healing, or constructor of psychological prisons. If you recognize yourself in Jung's description, it is not just an identity, it's an invitation. Your evolution toward empathic sovereignty is more than personal growth. It is service to the awakening of human consciousness itself. See the architecture. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.